Hi, I'm Katie Crane, and this is the Pilates Lounge. Welcome to Season 4, my friends, of the Pilates Lounge Podcast. This is a space for movement lovers, Pilates educators, and Pilates professionals who want to think a little bit deeper about the work we do. My name's Katie Crane. I've been teaching Pilates for over 20 years, and along the way, I've worn many hats: studio owner, teacher trainer, mentor, and lifelong student of the work we do. I'm also a surfer, an adventurer, a mum, a busy wife, and someone who believes that movement is by far more than exercise. On this podcast, we talk about Pilates as a practice, not just what we do on the mat or on the equipment, but how Pilates shapes the way we move, teach, lead, and live our lives. We explore anatomy, health, business, culture, and the evolving identity of Pilates in the modern world. This is a place for honest conversations, lived experience, and perspectives that respect both the lineage of Pilates and the people practicing it today. So thank you so much for being here. Let's dive into the episode. Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Pilates Lounge Podcast. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I just had some time out, and it made me realize the importance of having time out. Not that I don't. Like, realistically, I'm not in my studio all the time, but I do work a lot because I've got a lot of different projects on. Not only do I run the bricks and mortar, I've got this teacher training, the podcast here. I'm naturally a very creative person. And I definitely notice when I'm working too much, then I lose my creative juices and I have to literally leave the country to reestablish that creative flair. And I know that you guys see me in Bali all the time. It's the reason that I go to Bali all the time is it's not about taking a holiday. It's actually about filling my own cup so that I can continue to produce stuff, because I just dry out. It's a strange feeling, but sometimes I don't realize it until I go away and come back. And then when I come back, I've got so much to share and so much energy and feel so much fuller. I guess it happens when you're a giver. I'm sure that on this channel, I'm not the only one who feels like that. I'm sure it's actually quite common for people who practice Pilates, who share Pilates with other people. We're naturally givers. And over the years, I've definitely learned how to put a little bit of a barrier up between myself and the people that I'm giving to. But you can't help but give away a lot of that energy. Anyway, I'm back. So I feel super renewed. And while I'm away, I do partake in a lot of thinking. I actually go away and surf. So I definitely feel being out in the water, sitting on my board, being in nature, all the things that come along with surfing. Practicing patience is a big part of surfing. I definitely feel that, though, that activity in particular. And even when I'm over in Indonesia, I'm not always in Bali, on any of the islands in Indonesia, we always get scooters and ride around on motorbikes. Even that just allows me to clear my head, because when I'm surfing, when I'm on a scooter, I'm never on my phone. I'm not in front of my laptop. I'm obviously not creating these podcasts. I'm not creating any work. So it just gives me so much more space for this to all happen. So on this trip, I started thinking a lot about teacher training. Obviously, I've got my own students. I actually just went down to Toowoomba before I went to Indonesia and spent the weekend with my students down there, which was amazing. And it was actually really nice to be in somebody else's studio in a completely different location to what I'm used to, and meeting more people. And if anything, it was another reminder of the importance of the work that we do as Pilates professionals, but the importance of the work of mentor or an educator or a teacher trainer. Then I came home, worked for a couple more days, and then shot off to Indo. And of course, I've got my own students here as well. And seriously, my students here really don't know how good they've got it because they've actually got access either to me or to one of my staff members who are all really highly skilled and highly trained. Sometimes I feel like my own students in my own studio don't show up as well as students at other studios, because students at other studios, they know that they don't get access to me all the time. But in where I live in Darwin at the moment, and probably over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of alternative teacher training certificates being offered. And the old me would have been fearful of those other offers. The old me would have had my knickers in a knot, had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I would have felt defensive about other certificates being offered because I used to think that I was in competition with other people. I don't think that anymore at all, because I'm really confident in what I do, but also I truly believe in all my heart that there's actually space for all of us anyway. I don't think that we do step on each other's toes. The people who come to me would not go to those other certificates, and vice versa. The people who go to those other certificates, they don't come to me. What does concern me is the quality of teacher training that is being offered. And yes, I am all about you do your thing and be great at it and all the best. And I want you to succeed. I want everybody in this industry to get out of it what they deserve. And nobody's working in this industry sitting around twiddling their thumbs. It actually doesn't matter how lacking your initial teacher training was. You're still working your butt off to make things succeed. So the people who are putting on training, I'm not saying don't put on training. My discussion here with you today is actually on the importance of recognizing what teacher training should be, honoring the work of Pilates as a practice, and recognizing the importance of actually telling people who you are and what it is that you can offer. So, for example, in one of the teacher training programs that I see where I live, the educator is calling herself a master of Pilates. Now, I don't know about you, and maybe I'm old school. I know that I'm old school. Like, I'm of that vintage of being old school, and I'm okay with that. In fact, I am knuckling down on being old school more so now than what I ever was. I used to want to be progressive, and now I want to be more old school because the progressive attitude has gotten, in my mind, has gotten so far away from the source, that's SOURCE, not tomato sauce, that a lot of practice now doesn't even understand where they're coming from. And I am not the Pilates police, right? In fact, if you follow my social media, which I don't really care if you don't, because I'm not a fan of social media. I'd rather you be here listening to the podcast. I feel like I can actually add more value to your life on the podcast. But I'm not into the Pilates police. I don't think that Pilates needs to be policed as much as sometimes it is. But on the other hand, because there's always two sides to every coin, if we don't have a solid foundation, then that becomes a house of cards. And I'm afraid, my friends, what I'm seeing in the teacher training space at the moment is a huge house of cards. So let's get into the really get into the episode, and maybe I'll come back to this. maybe you've heard of Jay Grimes. Jay Grimes was actually taught by Joseph and Clara Pilates. And he said something that I think about all the time, especially lately. He said Pilates has a lineage, not a trend, not a franchise, not a logo, and not a workout you bolt on to the end of a gym timetable, not even a reformer class, a lineage. And if Pilates has a lineage, it means that it came from somewhere. It came from someone. It was passed hand to hand, body to body, teacher to student, all the way back to Joseph Pilates and Clara Pilates himself and herself. Jay Grimes also said, if you're going to learn Pilates, get as close to the source as possible. And that's really what sticks with me is really getting close to the source. And I would say that statement would apply to every single industry, every career choice, every job, every experience that you have in your life. Get as close to the source as possible. Like, for example, our family we've been to Japan twice. We go there to go snowboarding. I grew up not really liking Japanese food. I'm going to put that in inverted commas because I grew up in a city in Australia which has no lineage to Japan whatsoever. So basically, I've probably been to about 3 Japanese restaurants my entire life. I did not like Japanese food. Well, guess what? When I go to Japan, I absolutely loved Japanese food. I had never experienced Japanese food from the source. So now my understanding and my appreciation of Japanese food is completely different to my understanding and my experience of Japanese food that I'd ever had in my life. Similar to, I live in Darwin. You probably know that by now. If you've never heard of Darwin, Darwin is like, if you looked at a map of Australia, we're right at the top, pretty much in the middle at the top. So we're about as far away from Melbourne and Sydney as what you could possibly be. So for those of you who are not in Australia and you think that everybody comes from Sydney or Melbourne, I get it, I understand it, but I don't come from there. I come from the top, which actually means that I am closer to Indonesia than what I am to Melbourne or Sydney, living in Darwin. The flight to Indonesia is like 2 hours away compared to if I want to fly to Sydney, it's 4.5 hours away, to give you an idea. So we go to Indonesia all the time. To me, Indonesia feels like home because I go there, like I'm talking 6 times a year and have done for the last 20 odd years that I've lived in Darwin. So I've been to Indonesia more times than what I've ever been to Sydney or Melbourne in my entire life. Some people have said to me that they don't like Bali or that they don't want to go to Bali because they wouldn't like it. And that just blows my mind that you've already made a decision that you don't like somewhere, even though you've never been there. Or another example, my husband is American. Well, a lot of people have a lot to say about Americans, right? The thing is, when I lived in America, I absolutely loved America. American people are some of the most beautiful, friendly, giving, nurturing. Uh, American people, in my experience, want you to stand on their shoulders, which means that they do not squash you down. Unlike in Australia, we have this tall poppy syndrome, which if you're from Australia, you know what the tall poppy syndrome is. Don't ever be good at anything until you're friends because they're going to heckle you about it like that's normal. No, there's actually why probably an American, not an Australian. In America, everybody wants you to succeed. But America has a really bad name, right? I mean, to anybody who follows mainstream media, anyone, And so marrying an American, I have seen firsthand a lot of really narrow views on American people from people who've never been to America. So all of these experiences are examples of people not getting close to the source. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So the question that I want you to sit with today, if this work has a source, how far have you drifted from it? Welcome to the Pilates Lounge, my friends. My name's Katie Crane. So let's get into it. Let's start with the word itself, lineage. A lineage is a line of descent. It's a thread. Think of a golden thread that connects you back to where something began. If I think of where you were born from your mother's womb, and that umbilical cord that keeps you connected to her. It's something that there's something very precious about that connection of a child to a mother when all goes well, right? So that connection of that golden thread of your Pilates lineage, that is real. And if you don't have Pilates lineage, then I actually don't understand what is your source? What is your foundation? What is your umbilical cord? What are you actually connected to? So in Pilates, when we think of lineage or family tree, what we think about is the people that Joseph and Clara Pilates initially taught. So the group of students that learnt directly from them, and then they in turn handed down their experience, their expertise to the next generation of instructors. So these are the people that are now recognized as the elders in Pilates. So we think of Romana, of Ron Fletcher, Kathy Grant, Eve Gentry, Carol Atria, Bruce King, Lolita San Miguel, and yes, Jay Grimes, who all trained with Joe and Clara, and they carried that work for the rest of their lives because they're not all here now, right? So those people learned the work in the room from the source. And then they taught that to the next generation, to their own students. I'm not being romantic. It's about being precise. So every time the work gets passed on from one set of hands to another, something can be lost. Like if you've ever played Chinese whispers, you know how quickly the message deteriorates and then the message changes into something completely different to what it started as. So if you're not even connected to that source, what is the message that you were getting and where did that message even come from? It's just made up out of space. It just does not make sense. So that understanding, that intention, and that why plays a huge role in the professional that we become. So if you go to too many hands away from the source and nobody along the way was paying any attention, what you end up with is what? You end up with choreography, which is exactly what we're seeing. If you typed in Pilates into any search engine now, probably even in AI, any of the Google searches or whatever they are, any of the social media searches, YouTube, if you just typed in Pilates, you would get like a circus of choreography. Choreography looks beautiful. There is no doubt about it. But ultimately, choreography is simply shapes with no meaning. It is movement with no lineage. It is cutting that golden thread before that thread has even been woven into anything. And this is what I want you to hear. Choose your lineage. That's what I'm saying. Choose it deliberately and choose that with your eyes open. Don't just fall into Whoever happened to certify you in a weekend. Don't just absorb whoever was the loudest marketing, because believe me, there's a heck of a lot of great marketing out there. Have a look where the work came from, trace the thread, and then choose to stand inside that line on purpose. So what I see at the moment in my industry is a whole lot of noise. Don't add to the noise by tuning into that station, because eventually that noise gets handed down to the next person, and that just gets cracklier and cracklier and cracklier until it's like you don't even have any substance anymore. You don't even have a Wi-Fi signal. If you want to keep the signal, make sure that you get as close to that modem as possible. Now, you can't choose a lineage that you don't understand, so you have to know the foundation. And this is where I get a little bit fierce, because the foundation is not the exciting part. It's not where you get to turn yourself into a pretzel. It's not where you're doing all the fancy work on the weekend course that you signed up for. It's not where you pay some money and get certified just for paying the money. It's not the flashy stuff. The foundation is actually doing the hard yards. Becoming certified is hard. Becoming certified means observation hours, sitting quietly and reflecting, learning work in your own body. It means repeating the same thing over and over and over again. I always say to my students, I love history, understanding where things come from. So I guess the etymology of things. And I remember hearing a story about the great Australian cricketer, Don Bradman. If you're not from Australia, or if you're not I'm not a cricket fan, but I know this. So Don Bradman was famous for hitting a century. So that's like 100 points in cricket. Excuse me if I'm not saying that properly. Obviously, I don't watch the game, but he hit 100 runs, I guess, in cricket. And when they interviewed him, they asked, how did you get so good at playing cricket to be able to hit a century? And he said that he used to practice hitting the cricket ball in his backyard against the water tank. And in Australia, in the olden days, I mean, we still have one at our house, but I know that a lot of places don't. People would collect rainwater in a corrugated iron water tank. So corrugated iron obviously have the waves going down. And so he was hitting the cricket ball against the corrugated iron water tank, which is actually round, and he never knew where that ball would land. But he would hit the ball and then he'd try and hit it again. So he got really, really good at hitting the ball. That's how he believes that he was able to make a century, was by repetition, hitting that ball over and over and over again. So I always say to my students, you're going to be doing footwork for the rest of your career. You're going to be teaching footwork. For the rest of your career, you're going to be practicing footwork. This is where it matters. So when you look on Instagram or wherever it is that you're looking, and you're looking at all of this choreography, what I would say, ask yourself is, where is that coming from? What is the point of that? And where was that exercise born from? So when we learn Pilates from the lineage, that's exactly what you learn. You learn, say you're learning elephant, you learn that elephant is actually an upside down teaser. Elephant is hundreds. Elephant is rollback. Elephant is rowing. Similar body shape, changing your relationship to gravity. So understanding the source of everything, understanding the thread that each piece of repertoire has with each other, is what makes you an outstanding educator and an outstanding instructor. So ultimately, I want to say this because it really matters. You cannot build a master on a cracked foundation. Too many times we're seeing people who want to skip the foundations. They want to get to the flashy stuff, to the advanced repertoire. They want to be teaching the advanced repertoire in their first 3 months of teaching, but because it looks good. Who cares what looks good on a reel? The question is, where does it come from? Why are we performing this? And who is it actually serving, and why is it serving them, or how is it serving them? The foundation is not something that you graduate from. The foundation is the thing that you return to for the rest of your career. The masters that you would admire are most of all still doing footwork. They're still refining the 100. They're still finding new depth in the most basic movement in the system. When I was down in Toowoomba, just before I went to Indo, I was teaching the footwork, which I've been teaching for 21 years, right? I teach the footwork every single day of my life. I was so excited to be teaching these particular students the footwork because they had all been practicing their Pilates in the studio, their own practice. They had never downloaded footwork the way that we did. They had never embodied footwork the way they were able to do in that half an hour that we went over footwork for. And then they got to practice teaching footwork on each other. And they all experienced footwork in a way that none of them had ever experienced before. That's how exciting footwork is. That's how much depth is in the footwork. So this is where I'm going to direct you, because I know, just because I have to. When you're learning this craft, when you're choosing a mentor, a teacher, a trainer, a course, whatever it is, choose from the most competent, the most qualified Pilates person you can find, a Pilates person. I don't care if the person is a physio. It doesn't mean that they know Pilates better, because I see a lot of times people are marketing their Pilates teacher training, and then their selling point is it's with a physiotherapist. Who cares? Do you know how much Pilates a physiotherapist learns in their whole physiotherapy career? Zero Pilates. You know how much time it takes to master Pilates? The same time as what it takes probably to master the physiotherapist. So probably about 4 years. So if it took them 4 years to become a physiotherapist, it would take them 4 years to become a master, somebody who could master Pilates. In fact, it takes longer than that to master something. If you like history, and you know that I do, there's this old saying that it takes about 10,000 hours for somebody to become a master. Hey friend, thanks so much for listening. Did you know that you can now find us on YouTube at youtube.com/The Pilates Professional? Now, if this episode resonates with you, please share it with someone else who would benefit from hearing it. Back to the show. It probably takes even longer, but don't ever fall for that I'm a master at my craft if the person A has never been taught by somebody who is a direct lineage of Joseph Pilates, B has not learned from somebody who is industry level certified. Industry level, so in Australia, we have the Pilates Association of Australia. In the States, that you have the PMA. Around the world, there are industry recognized certifications. It doesn't mean that you're a physiotherapist. That's a completely different career path. Marketing that our Pilates course is taught by a physiotherapist is no different to saying our physiotherapist course is taught by a dentist. Who cares? It's irrelevant. It's not Pilates. You want to be learning from somebody who has mastered the craft of Pilates from the direct source of Joseph Pilates. It's very, very simple. Now, I know, and I hear it all the time, so I'm going to talk about it. I often hear on this conversation, students will defend their educators all the time. And I get it. You've met your educator has spent time with you, they're a wonderful person, they were kind to you, they encouraged you, they made you feel like you were doing well. they gave you a certificate, they spent time with you. I'm not saying that your educator isn't a nice person. What I'm asking is, are they the best to be teaching you the craft of Pilates? So just because your educator taught you everything you know, well, how much do you know? And there's that whole thing like, you only know what you know. So who are you to be defending your educator if you don't know any different? If you've never been taught by somebody who is of direct lineage to Joseph and Clara Pilates, if you've never been taught by somebody who actually is a master of the craft, which is 10 years of teaching on their own back and also being connected to the source. If you've never been exposed to an educator who is of such guild, then who are you to defend the person who gave you your certificate? You've actually got nothing to compare it to. So I would say sit down. And I understand your loyalty, I really do. But here's the hard truth. You only know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. So if you're standing there defending somebody who was not recognized by the industry body, who is not of the lineage, who never learned from the source themselves, I have to ask you, what are you actually defending? Like, how would you even know that they're the best? What are you comparing, in inverted commas, the best to? You can't measure the quality of your teaching if you've never stood in front of a real master yourself. You don't have the reference point. You're defending the only thing you've ever known, which isn't anything to be basing a foundation on. And listen, just because you gave somebody your money, just because they were so lovely, such a wonderful human being, and just because you walked away having learned something, that does not mean that what you learned is of value in the Pilates field. Nice is not the same as qualified. Kind is not the same as competent. And helpful is not the same as correct. So, my friends, choose your mentor because they actually have the expertise. The expertise means expertise in Pilates, and when I see these, and they're well-meaning people, when I see these certificate people, I'm not even going to call them educators, calling themselves masters, I would dare say if somebody is calling themselves a master in something, they're most probably much further from the truth than what they realize. And that comes from somebody, like, I've been teaching for 21 years and I do not call myself a master educator. I've got 4 diplomas in Pilates and I do not call myself a master educator because you know what happened? And I'm going to tell you the truth. I did go through a phase where I was in my own head calling myself a master educator. It's not a bad thing. I think it's actually a learning curve. You get to the point where you've put so much effort into what you do. You've put so much time and energy and you feel like you've done the hard yards and you become righteous. You want people to recognize the hard work that you've done. I really do get that because I've been there. And I remember in my own head calling myself a master. From memory, I may have even put it on my website for a little while. It's not up there anymore because you know what happened? As soon as I started to think that I knew enough to call myself a master, I actually started to playing in bigger circles. And what I mean by bigger circles is I started to look to other people who had way more mastery than me, way more education, way more knowledge than me. And you know what happened? All of a sudden I felt like an apprentice again. And because what I was looking for had changed. And once I started to learn from those people, I actually realized that, you know what? 4 diplomas of Pilates was only the beginning. So 4 diplomas of Pilates took me in total 10 years to complete because each diploma of Pilates was 700 hours of study. And because I was also working full time, running my own business as a Pilates studio, seeing Pilates clients full time, sometimes those certificates took me a couple of years, or, I'd have a couple of years space between one and then the next before I started the next one. But 10 years of just Pilates diplomas. And once I completed them, I realized that I was only at the beginning of my learning. And learning is not convenient, right? Like, it is hard to learn. It costs you. I mean, I can tell you now, when I did my Polestar diploma, and I didn't complete the exams because I had already examined in my initial training. So I didn't complete, say, the Polestar diploma. But part of the reason I didn't complete that diploma was because I was flying from Darwin down to Adelaide for each weekend. So that's a 4.5 hour flight just to get there for the weekend. And then sometimes I was staying with a friend. Sometimes I was paying for accommodation. I was renting a car. I mean, that one diploma cost me close to $20,000 to complete it, just the one. So it costs me. It costs you. It costs you time. It costs you money. It costs you ego. It costs you comfort. There is nothing easy about learning from the source. And I chose to go to Adelaide to practice, to learn the Polestar diploma, because at the time, the educator there I knew was one of the best people in Australia that I could get my hands on when it came to that particular training. And I knew that that person had worked directly with Brent Anderson, who is the owner of Polestar, who had direct lineage to Joseph Pilates. You have to put in that time. You have to put in that money. You have to go through the inconvenience of learning from the source. So if you have not learnt from the source, and if you are defending whatever it is that you chose to do, stop it. Sit down, listen, and learn. Do the hard thing. Become better. And then, only then, do you get to stand on the shoulders of giants. And this is the whole reason that we become educators, not because we want to make a quick buck out of it, not because we want accolades. You really don't get nobody's ever going to stand up on my grave and be like, oh, well, wasn't she amazing? All of the money that she put into her own education so that she could pass that on to the next generation of Pilates teachers. There is none of that that's going to happen. And there is no reason to expect that to happen. And what I see when people are calling themselves masters or master educators way before they should ever be calling themselves master educators is because you're at that stage in your career where you're looking for recognition. And I get it. I really do. I remember going through that as well. And then the hard truth hit me that on this big blue world, I am just a drop in the ocean. Nobody really gives a fuck about me. And I am nobody. I am nothing. All I can do is be the best I can possibly be. And this is what really gets my goat when people are offering certificates or looking for certificates or calling themselves masters when they're not, because the only reason that we should be doing this work as an educator is simply to serve other people. And if you really wanted to serve other people, then you would do the hard work yourself. And you would do whatever it takes to get as close to the source, because the source matters. Because without the source, without Joseph and Clara Pilates, you would not be here right now doing what it is that you do. So the least you could do is have respect for the source and learn it and learn from it. I'm not saying that we're not allowed to change Pilates. I'm not saying don't go and turn yourself into a pretzel on a reformer if that's what you want to do. But if you don't know where all of that comes from, if you really don't understand what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it, then what's your point? So I'm going to slow down a little bit. because I want to talk about this word mastery a little bit more. So let's go into the language. And I have spoken a little bit about it, right? And you know how I feel about language. So words come from somewhere. And when you understand where they come from, you get to use them properly. So, word master. It actually comes through an Old English and Old French, but the root is Latin, right? Magister. And this is a beautiful part. Magister comes from magis, meaning more or greater. A master at the root of the word is the greater one, the one who knows more. And that's why once I thought that I was a master, and then I looked to the next person above me or the next people above me to learn, to continue learning. And then I realized I don't know nothing. 4 diplomas in Pilates, and I really didn't know. It's not that I didn't know anything, right? I knew more than what somebody without 4 diplomas of Pilates knew, but as far as knowing, I didn't know anything. So the one who knows more, and it sits in direct contrast to its sister word, minister, which comes from minus, meaning less. A minister was the lesser one, right? The servant, the attendant. Whereas the master, the magister, was the leader, the one who knew more. So sit with that. The very word master is built on the idea of more knowledge, more skill, more hours, more depth, more commitment. And in the medieval universities, the magister meant something very, very specific. It was a title. It was meant that you had earned the authority to teach. So you didn't get to call yourself a master. You didn't choose when you became a master. You were made one. You were invited. And it's actually similar to the way that Joseph and Clara Pilates taught their students. You were invited to then teach the work. You didn't get to choose. So you didn't just pay for a certificate and then get to go out and call yourself a Pilates instructor because you had paid for something. A lot of my students who come to my teacher training, they fail their first exam. They fail the first time that they teach their examination class because they are not ready yet. They don't get to choose when they're ready. They come to me and they will ask if they can teach a class in front of me, and then I will assess them and I'll let them know whether or not they're ready. Because when you hand on that certificate to somebody, or when anybody hands that certificate to you, you are representing the person or the company or the group of people that you received that from. So if that hasn't been difficult, if that hasn't made you uncomfortable, if that hasn't at some stage made you feel like what you had entered into was too big, was too much, was too hard, then you're learning from the wrong people. So the idea is that you become a master in the eyes of the masters because you continue the thread. You get handed that golden thread that comes from the source. So how did people become masters historically? Well, let's look, because it tells us everything. So think about the guild system of medieval Europe, right? If you wanted to become a master craftsman, say a master mason, a master goldsmith, a master carpenter, there was a path, and that path was long. So first, you were an apprentice. So when I did my teacher training, that's what I thought of it as. I thought of it as an apprenticeship. So my question to you is that how you thought of your teacher training? Did you feel like it was an apprenticeship? Like, were you given a set of tasks that you had to really master yourself, and then you had to perform that in front of your master teacher, and then they told you whether or not you're good enough? Because that's ultimately what an apprentice does. But I've got plenty of friends who did apprenticeships as well, and you get to do the shittiest jobs when you first start out as the apprentice. In Pilates, what you do is you sit in the room, you observe, you take notes, you ask questions when there's time, you self-practice and you self-practice more. In the golden age, in the olden days, you lived with your master. You swept the floor, you prepared the materials, and you watched. And you did that for years. Then you became a journeyman. Now, and only now as a journeyman could you work. You could now be paid. So as an apprentice, you don't get paid. As a journeyman, then you get paid, but you were still learning. You're still under supervision, still traveling from workshop to gather more information, more lessons, more tools. And then, only then, after years, sometimes after a decade or more, you might produce your masterpiece. So that's literally where the word came from, your masterpiece, the single work that you submitted to the guild to prove that you had earned the title of master. So look at master painters, look at the Renaissance workshops, Leonardo da Vinci. He didn't begin as Leonardo, he was apprenticed as a teenager grinding pigments. So actually grinding up the colors to make the paints. He was preparing panels, learning by doing the humble work first. But these days, what we see in this shitfire of Pilates is that people want to show up and do this advanced work from day one, and they have no idea why they're actually doing it. So you've heard of the 10,000 hours idea, right? So that actually came into mainstream through Malcolm Gladwell. He was drawing on research of Anders Ericsson into expert performance. And people argue about the exact number. Is it 10,000? Is it more? Is it less? Does it depend? Honestly, I don't really care what the precise figure is. The number is not important. The number, the point is that the truth underneath the number. Mastery takes time, real time. Like I'm talking years of time. The old saying is 10 years to master a craft, and the hours pile up inside those years. Hours after hours after hours of focus, deliberate, and often hard work. But here's the part that the 10,000 hour conversation often misses. It's not just the time, it's the deliberate practice. It's not mindlessly teaching the same class for a decade. It's teaching with attention, with intention, refining, being corrected, trying again, and failing until you do better. You cannot shortcut this. It's actually why I did 4 diplomas. You think that I didn't go over a lot of the same exercises in 4 diplomas? I mean, realistically, pretty much all of the basic work, all of the foundational work that we do, no matter what certificate that you do, it's exactly the same. But you know what I did? I saw footwork through 4 different lenses. I saw hundreds through 4 different lenses. I saw teaser through 4 different lenses. Everything was taught slightly differently because the lineage, the foundation of that learning had come from Joe and Clara Pilates, but then it had been handed on to an individual who took their perception of it, and then they taught that perception to the wider community. So in a world where we are obsessed with shortcuts, with hacks, with 10 days to a 6-figure studio, I can tell you now, after 21 years of owning a studio, it does not take you 10 days to create a 6-figure studio. You know, with this quick certification, fast track the bypass. There is no bypass for the road, my friends. There is only the road. The shortcut is the long way round, because what you skip now, you will have to come back and learn anyway. And usually after you've already taught it wrong to 100 or more people. So do the hours, honor the hours. The hours are not the obstacle. The hours are the craft. So masters, and I've said it before, we never stop being students. I'll say it about every great teacher I've ever met in this work. The ones who are truly excellent are the ones who are still hungry. It's the ones who are still, maybe they're presenting workshops, but they're still going to workshops. Maybe they're still being mentored. They're still saying, I don't know, teach me. I say that to every time that I practice with my students. So say I'm presenting to my students, I always remind them that I'm so grateful that I get to continue learning from them. Every single body that I'm teaching, I'm learning from. Be a student and be coachable. So I want to leave you with some voices, words from people who gave their lives to a craft in our world and beyond. Joseph Pilates himself said, patience and persistence are vital qualities in the ultimate successful accomplishment of any worthwhile endeavor. Patience and persistence, not speed, not shortcuts. Romana, who carried the work for so long, was known for a simple, devastating instruction to her students. She just asked them to do it again and again and again. Repetition as devotion. And from outside our world, a line most people know as Aristotle, although it's actually a historian, Will Darren, summing up Aristotle's teaching in his own words. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And that thought is pure, Aristotle. It's virtue built through repetition. So even if the famous words are durance. Now there's two old Italian words that I love. Ancora, empower. I'm still learning. They're traditionally attached to Michelangelo near the end of his life. And to be honest, scholars now think this attribution is shaky. He probably never even said it, but the phrase has survived for 500 years anyway, because it captures something true, that even the greatest artist imaginable could still call himself a student. Be a student always. Patience, repetition, humility. The long road is the student's heart that never closes. That, my friends, is the lineage of mastery. And that is what we are choosing to stand inside. That is what we are choosing to be a part of. So let me bring it home. Jay Grimes told us Pilates had a lineage. Choose yours. Know the foundation and keep returning to it. Choose the most qualified, the most devoted Pilates professional you can find. Not a physio, not a marketer, not a fitness instructor, but someone whose whole heart is in this craft, in the craft of Pilates. Understand that master means the greater one, and that greatness is earned over years and not given over a weekend. Do the hours, my friends. Take no shortcuts. There is no road but the road. And whatever level you teach, stay a student, stay coachable, keep a beginner's mind, keep saying, Ancora, empower. I am still learning, because that, my friends, is what it means to keep this work close to the source. We are not just teaching exercises. We are not just teaching repertoire. We are not just putting contemporary choreography together. We are carrying a lineage. We are carrying history into the future. So carry that well and carry it with purpose, with intention, and with pride. Know that you are part of history, not part of a fad. I'm Katie Crane, my friends. This has been the Pilates Lounge. Until next time, keep your standards high, keep your heart open, and keep moving always. Now, if this episode has resonated with you, this is exactly the work we do inside Pilates Pro Academy, keeping the craft close to the source. Come and find me at thepilatesprofessional.com.au. See you next time. And that's a wrap, my friend. Now, before you go, make sure you check out the show notes. That's exactly where you'll find anything we're offering alongside this very episode and the link to subscribe to the Pilates Muse newsletter. Our subscribers receive free handouts and resources connected to the topics we explore right here. They're specifically created for Pilates professionals, movement educators, and Pilates lovers just like you. So, until the next episode,